Alrighty, so in this wacky and wild, topsy-turvy, crazy, zany world of Major League Rugby, things can change on a dime, and they have. After we basically finished this show, done with the editing, dispersal draft information started to leak out. Here's what we know. The first four picks were Toronto players. Miami took Tyler Wong, Dallas took Mitch Richardson, Chicago took Mason Flesch, and LA took Tyler Rowland. NOLA then took Teofilo Ed Fido out of New York. They also took, via Utah, Nate Augsburger, who I think is going to end up in Chicago. Houston passed. They didn't take anybody. D.C. took Connor Buckley out of New York. Seattle took Chance Wangluski out of New York, who was not a free agent. San Diego took Charlie Hewitt out of New York. New England took Caleb Geiger out of New York. I think that could be the best pickup of the draft. Other rounds have Chicago taking Brad Tucker out of New York, D.C. taking John Powers out of New York, L.A. taking Jason Emery out of New York, LA taking Andrew Coe out of New York, NOLA taking Tom Franklin, who was out of New York, not San Diego, and San Diego taking Chris Mattina. Now, these players may or may not end up with these clubs. They may be traded. There's still stuff going on, and there's a whole slew of players that I don't know about at this time. But what my intel tells me, about 40 players out of 68 were drafted. We'll see what happens. But now, let's get back to the show. Next on MLR Weekly, Seattle Seawolves owner Adrian Balfour, Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News with dispersal draft stuff, and John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning with trades, rumors, and whatnot.
Rugby Wrap-Ups MLR Weekly brought to you by Sheehy Auto Stores. It's easy at Sheehy. The Pig and Whistle, New York City, the world's best rugby pub. And Lean and Limber, stretching your way to a healthier lifestyle. Thank you for tuning into this week's MLR Weekly as presented by Rugby Wrap-Up. Good to see you, Matt McCarthy in New York City, and we have a great show for you this week, including owner of the Seattle Seawolves and not so shy Adrian Balfour. We should get some interesting tidbits out of him on all the hot topics. We have Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News. We're going to go through the dispersal draft. And before we get to any of it, as per usual, we have our recurring segment, Rugby Morning's Coffee Break with John Fitzpatrick. John, welcome back to MLR Weekly. What do you got for us?
Hey, Tommy DeVito, what's with the hat and why are you wearing it?
Hey, I'm wearing it like this because things have gone sideways in the MLR. Dylan the Butcher Fawcett, one of my favorite players ever to don cleats, the Butcher, has taken his meat shop and cleaver to Chicago. It's just impossible. Chicago, you're going to love the guy. He's going to be the face of your franchise within 15 minutes. But man, do I miss him more. And now the wound just feels like salt's in it. Next!
Well, Matt, folks across the corporate world may be starting to send those let's talk in the new year messages, but moves are happening across MLR. Of course, the biggest moves will be what happens with that New York and Toronto player dispersal draft, which I'm sure you'll cover with America's favorite Canadian, Mr. Bryan Ray, later in this episode. But here are some more notable moves. You mentioned that Chicago signed Dylan Fawcett. You may ask, how are they able to get him before the player dispersal draft started?
Hey, how are they able to get him before the player dispersal draft?
Well, Matt, it's because he was not under contract for New York in 2024. What do you make of that?
The ink wasn't dry on the contract, probably because he held that pen out of suspicion. Chance Wangluski's another guy in that category. And up north, I don't know if it was out of suspicion or looking around and seeing no Gatorade in the fridge, but Lucas Rumble is also a free agent. So these three guys are not going into the dispersal draft. Next!
Hey, a big move out on the West Coast. The San Diego Legion have signed USA men's Eagle Greg Peterson. You may know that he's on a short-term loan with the Glasgow Warriors, but he'll make his first appearance in MLR in 2024. Matt, that is big news. What do you think of that?
Yes, the USA Eagles veteran lock. He is a moose, a great addition on and off the pitch. Greg is the kind of guy that does all of those things that don't show up in a box score. He does all the engine work, all the dirty work.
He logs a ton of minutes, and he's like 6'70" and 260 pounds of just falling on you and killing you during a game. Great pickup, but I guess he's like a giraffe, but he must eat like an elephant because there's only peanuts left. As far as I'm looking at salary. Next.
Hey, Matt, a couple more moves to call out here. The Houston SaberCats, they have re-signed a couple of players, 2 South Africans, scrum half Carlo Denison and lock Marno Redling Heiss. Noah Gold, they have re-signed young center Jordan Jackson Hope. And Old Glory DC, they have re-signed, young hooker Koi Nelligan. What do you make of those moves, Matty boy?
I like him. And, speaking of the last one, Koi Nelligan, Army. He's one of the guys that got the special dispensation to go pursue this professional rugby career before signing. His teammate is Colin Gross. 2 great kids, great men, and representatives of this country and rugby. Next!
Matt, last thing here. I saw this interesting article that mentioned there may be a MLR team or a rugby team based in Monterrey, Mexico that may enter MLR in 2025. Matt, Monterrey, Mexico, huh? You're a fan of classic crooners. Complete this song lyric for me. It happened in Monterrey. A long
Mexico. Time ago, it happened in Monterey. I met her in Monterey, in old Mexico. It's all Blue Eyes, and he's from Hoboken, and that's where some of my best memories with Rugby New York were, in Hoboken. Thanks for just putting more salt in the wound, John. What else you got?
Matt, that's all I got. This segment needs to go swim with the fishes. I'm out of here.
All right, on that note, I want to thank Mr. John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning. We'll be right back with Adrian Balfour, the owner of the Seattle Seawolves, after this.
Digs like a demented mole there.
Need a great price on a new vehicle? Sheehy makes it easy. Easy Price shows you our lowest prices on the Mid-Atlantic's largest selection. Find your best price online or at any of our 31 dealerships.
It's easy at Sheehy. Sheehy.com.
You need your cleats? You need them tomorrow? If you order today by 3 p.m. New York time or noon LA time, they can have them to you tomorrow. Young, old, male, female, if you're playing on turf, if you're playing on grass, if you're playing in the rain, you're playing in the heat, they've got you covered. RugbyNow.com. Go there now. And we're back with Mr. Adrian Balfour, owner of the Seattle Seawolves. Adrian, welcome back to MLR Weekly.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
First question, out of the gate for you, Mr. Balfour. What happened with New York?
Matt, thanks for having me on. And I'm just happy to have survived this current year. So Seattle are moving forward into their 7th season, and we're just pretty happy about that. With New York, COVID hit, and there's a long tail to COVID. The impact of that goes on and on and on. And, the longer it goes, the harder it is for teams to survive. And if you want a team to survive, you got to have a very healthy base home environment with lots of fans and with a home stadium. And I think New York had 4 bases over the sort of like 5-6 years that I remember. I've been to most of them. It's hard when you're moving around like that to keep a loyal base of fans and to get them to turn out week on week. You need revenue, from ticket sales, and if that doesn't come, you're vulnerable.
So, and it really hit right between my eyes because I'm here in New York and worked with the organization, called the games, and it's just one story after the next of carnage. And as I was saying on the show last week to Nate Augsburger and Chris Mattina, it doesn't really hit you as hard until it happens in your own city. It's like watching the news and something happened in Wisconsin or something happened elsewhere, but when it hits hard. And I now know what they're going through in Toronto, which was devastating.
But the one thing about New York is the guys and the team and the resources and the office and the rest of the guys in New York are all really good people. And I don't think it's going to be long before New York bounces back. Take a look at LA. LA were out for like 1-2 seasons, and now they're back. You know New York is coming back. It's just a matter of time, the next iteration, I think, is going to have a very solid home. The team is pretty much, the people that know rugby in New York are kind of assembled and ready to go. So for a future owner coming in, that's actually a really good market.
It is.
So I don't think it's going to be long before that's snapped up, because the DNA is there. All the hard work is done. So, get that DNA together and get a good ownership group together, and I think it'll take off. What do
you think the chances of 2025 having a New York franchise are?
I'll put it 50-50.
And all right, let's piggyback that a little bit. I was going to move on to LA. We'll get to LA in a second, but what's World Rugby's view of New York and Toronto fading?
I haven't talked to Alan or any of the guys in New York and World Rugby yet. I think they've got some other fish to fry, to be honest. But from my understanding, they're focused on the problems that they have. They're focused on their agenda. I don't think it really matters to them. We're growing and moving forward. There are new teams looking to come into MLR. So things like this happen. It's to be expected in a startup. I've been in the startup world for 30 years, done 6 companies. It's never a straight line. It's always serpentine, it's zigzag. Things happen, shocks happen, you absorb them, you move forward. And that's what we're doing. And so the league is, I think, better run than ever over the last year or two. It's really, the league office has been really, stepping up to the challenge and really running things pretty well. In my humble opinion, just having been there from the start, like been there from like -1, to today, I think it's way better run. I think the relationship with World Rugby is good. Relationship with USA Rugby now is really good too. So, it's about us trying to grow domestic rugby in North America. That's the bottom line. And that's where our focus is going to be.
All right, let's go to LA. They made a capital call, as far as my intel tells me. They've shown financials. They've got a good organization. Yet, again, social media will have you think that they're not involved or there's something wrong.
That's why I try not to read social media very much, You just go back in history, right? So Atlanta was set up, by a group of people and one particular owner. And unfortunately, that owner passed away, So a similar situation to Toronto. It was then picked up by another owner in MLR on a temporary basis to make sure that team could survive. And that owner has been working hard to keep that team in the game and not go under. And then eventually that owner found another group of people that would be willing to invest, but they wanted to move the team to LA. And so, Eric, was working.
Eric Anderson of the Free Jacks.
Yeah, the Free Jacks. He supported Atlanta for a season or two to help them through this sort of like current period. He found an ownership group in LA. They're willing to work with him and take the team on. And the team is, unfortunately for the folks in Atlanta, the team is going to have to relocate to LA. But the team that they have in LA, they're going to run that organization, seems strong. They've made their capital call, which is the big litmus test. And they are in the draft. They are ready to go, and they're going to play next season.
All right. So you said draft. The dispersal draft is what you're referring to, of players
That's
from
right.
Toronto and New York.
Yeah.
And this show is being taped basically the day of the draft being made. What happens to players that don't want to go to a particular club that may or may not draft them and then don't get any interest elsewhere?
Yeah, so I think there is a program, and I'm not specific on the details, but there is a program the league has about severance, where they will get a portion of their salary paid out. And I think the teams that pick up players through the draft will get salary cap increases to allow them to pay those players the delta, and so they won't be penalized for picking up players. Which I think is a big deal. That money still has to come from somewhere, right? So individual owners, are not billionaires or gazillionaires like people think. These are just individual owners, and the teams are ordinary people. right? They got houses, livelihoods. They don't have buckets of cash sloshing
Some
around.
of them are farmers.
Some of them are farmers, yeah.
As
yours
you've been up
truly.
since 5 a.m. this morning and feeding all the animals and then coming on the show, which is remarkable to me because I'm all puffy-eyed early.
Yeah, no, you just get out there. Nothing like a bunch of sheep's bottoms in the morning to make you wake up. So,
Tumbling
So-
keeps you grounded.
keeps you grounded, right? So, but they're ordinary people, right? So that money still has to come from somewhere. So, we don't want teams to be, we talked about this like 5-6 years ago. We don't want teams to be under financial stress because they'll fold, So we got to make sure that there's a balance there, that the salaries don't get out of control, and more teams go bankrupt. I mean, that's the big risk here.
Will Seattle draft any players?
Seattle, yeah, of course. Seattle is consistently strong year in, year out, and we like to push for the playoffs and we like to push for the final. So obviously we're going to make sure we've got depth in the squad. And if there's good players available, which there are, then we're going to make a play for them. Are we going to be able to outbid other teams for those players? I just don't know.
What do you think of the season coming up?
Look, I would not get depressed about the season coming up, to be honest. I think
It's too soon for me, pal. It's too soon for me.
Just don't get depressed about it. Like, you've got two teams that went out. Is that bad? Yes. Is the league trying to do their best to help domestic players get onto other teams and get settled? Yes. Is that a good process? It's never going to be a good process, ever, right? But they're trying to make the best of it. Once we get players on site in January, they're going to get into the training programs. Things are going to start to pick up. And when the whistle blows in March, it's going to be a really good season. From what I've seen of the player caliber coming into each of the teams this season, I actually think there's going to be a 20-30% step up in the quality of performance on the field. And I think that is going to drive fans into stadiums, and that is going to help the teams be more robust, and that's going to help a better TV experience. And then that in turn is going to help other teams decide, okay, let's jump in. The league is totally solid. I have no worries as a 7-year investor in Major League Rugby. I mean, I've been investing in Major League for over 7 years. And as a 7-year serial investor, I have never been more happy about the fact that we are getting further and further away from COVID.
I think the players talking about unionization has hurt the Toronto and New York potential investor groups. If I have a room, would you be willing to come into that room with, say, a Michael Young and a Nick Chavetta and whomever else is representing that side, along with the representatives of your side, to try to hammer this thing out?
Matt, you know me, I'll talk to anyone, right? I'm happy to have a conversation about rugby and anything. I just think that the them and us type atmosphere that these sort of situations can create is negative overall for rugby. I also think if the perspective is that it's a them and us situation, that might mean that people that are on the sidelines waiting to get in might think twice. And that is my perspective. I think there is some evidence behind that. But, why don't we just kind of like work together and try and work together to grow the game? Maybe a players' association to take a look at how you care for players outside of the season. That would be a good idea. Yeah, everyone could support that. Let's just make baby steps and try and move forward together.
All right. So I'm going to take that as the long answer to a yes, that you will come in that room if I can set this thing up.
I'll talk to anyone, Matt. You know that.
All right, Mr. Adrian Balfour, thank you once again for coming on MLR Weekly.
Thank you. Keep smiling. It's going to be a good season. Don't stress about it.
I'm an ultimate optimist, an eternal optimist. So I'll keep smiling.
It's going to be good. And New York, 2025, 2026, it's going to come back. Don't worry about it.
All right, buddy. Mr. Adrian Balfour, we'll be right back with Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News, whose backgrounds never disappoint. We'll be right back.
I wouldn't like to be at the bottom of that.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub.
The Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street. This is the Rugby Odds, where an unlikely pundit panel of a wordsmith, a WWE legend, a rugby star, and a supermodel scour the globe, seeking best bets and bad behavior. Are you not entertained? College game improves on a daily basis here in the United States, and there'll be a chock full of MLR stars coming out of the National Collegiate Rugby Championships in Houston. Yours truly was there. Here's a little peek.
Wayne State does not draw the penalty. They're up, and here comes Price. Price looking at the line. Charles Price, the freshman, touched it down. Trophy here is that's it. Your champion, Canada. Star Wars fan. Now they move it up to the wing. They've got some speed out here, and Tyler Rogers. Tyler Rogers rounds one. Tyler Rogers says hello to the 50-meter line. Tyler Rogers shows him. He's going to hang on to it. Tyler Rogers just having fun here. Going to run to the Gulf of Mexico the way he's going. He is straight in. They're about 15 meters out. Caleb Schmidt puts one around there. Nice little move. And Dempsey headed towards the line. Can they get it back in? And they do. Nearly went in behind.
Championship final between the Kentucky Wildcats and the Louisville Cardinals.
A bit earlier than he wanted to, but that guy had momentum.
It doesn't matter here to these Falcons. Falcons want this championship as they show it right here. Look at that support line.
Yeah, Knieger, he came from the open side back to the
collegiate rugby. You see the trophy right there. Wasting no time.
And we're back with Mr. Bryan Ray, whose backdrops never seem to disappoint. Bryan, welcome to MLR Weekly once again, my friend.
These are rough days for rugby fans in the Northeast, and I guess I should be sending my condolences to you this week after, you were pretty much helping me get through that struggle the last time we did this.
The ink is not yet dried on my tattoo of the New York logo with the cheeseburger under the NY, Wimpy's cheeseburger under the NY, and it's still too fresh, Bryan, but we can commiserate. You went through it, so maybe, you're my counseling. But we have a macabre sense of humor here. Let's talk about what's in front of us now instead of what's behind us. The dispersal draft of players between Toronto and New York that can be picked amongst the other teams. It's going to come out the minute after this show publishes. So all we can do is speculate.
Well, I mean, the first thing, you got to take into account here is not everybody's going to be in the dispersal draft. I'm hearing of those who were eligible that almost everybody opted in. A couple names opted out. One of them, people may have heard of, Aaron Cruden. He won't be taken, but I don't think that's any surprise to anybody. It sounds like Chance Wingluski and Lucas Rumble, who certainly would have been, guys you would think would be high up in this draft, also free agents.
Well, they're better off as free agents, And
yeah.
I think with Dylan, he was suspicious of things, as he is suspicious by nature, and I think he was wise, and his gamble paid off. And that's not to say that there wasn't a contract ready to go, right? But I think he was looking at what was going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of talent but
there's going to be players there's going to be some no demand players as well, and there's going to be a lot of them.
Obviously, not everybody's going to be able to find a home. Most of these teams have done the bulk of their recruiting already. They're going to have 2, maybe 3 spots on their roster open, and most of them are going to be really position specific, right? So the guys in those positions where it's hard to find, especially the tight 5, will be in high demand, and the back line maybe not so much. So yeah, and the other situation is with the the guys, say the import players, or the international players particularly, going to Toronto, where you would have had a visa maybe to play in Canada but not in the United States. So that's another complicated factor.
Forget about it.
Yeah, and the import limit hasn't changed at all for the remaining teams. So out of spaces to fit them in. You know, I think a couple of them will still get signed anyways, but yeah, there's definitely going to be some guys who don't find homes.
I could see one of three players going up to New England. And I've been told by New England they're only interested in one player. So there's some breaking news. They're only looking at one player. But I could see either an Andrew Coe, a Flesh, or a Caleb Geiger going up there.
I think if they're picking one, it'll be Tucker or Flesh. I don't think they will. I think they're stocked a prop in the front row. I don't think they'll take Geiger. And I can't see them take as good as Coe is. I think, number one, he's probably a little bit too expensive for their needs. They've got outside backs that can fill in there. I think they've got wings or fullbacks, though. I just think with the three specialist locks, they've got, they have Piers Van Dalen as well, who's another lock 6 type, but I think they need another body there. So I would be frankly shocked if it wasn't Flesh or Tucker. And if I had to pick, it would probably be Flesh, just because I think Tucker will probably go higher, and Flesh is a bit younger, and he fits that whole Canadian vibe they've got going on there. So yeah, if we're going to speculate,
how long do you think Geiger will be on the table?
Not long. So again, if they're picking at 11, I don't think Geiger's going to last that long.
Well, if he does, I bet you they grab him. I bet if he does, and I don't think he will. I think he's going to come off the board pretty quickly.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what do you think Dallas does?
I mean, Dallas is they've got a lot of their of imports, right? So they'll be looking domestic. I think front row. I think they would love to have Chance Wangluski if they can get him. Tyler Rowland, they would look at him certainly as a tight head prop from the Arrows. They've got Kyle Steves, a Canadian, and one Pablo Zeiss, but it can never have too many. Yeah, Dallas would like to have Wangluski. Sure. I think they'd love to have Andrew Coe. I think they'd love to have Chris Matina as well. Any of those guys would be good fits for them. They could really use a domestic 10-15 type. Matinas are the good versatility.
What about Matina going back to Chicago?
That would be interesting. I don't know if he fits there anymore. They got Adrian Carl, so I mean that was kind of supposed to be his replacement. If you look at the roster, I think there's room for him. They've only, I don't know who else they've got at 10 aside from Cardi and Carlson.
Tina said on the show last week, it's like he can never get settled. He finally felt like he was coming back. He was home. He had a position. He had finally got the contract, and now everything is up in the air for him again. And he's like, he's a mush. It's him and Brooklyn Hardick are the only two players in the league that have gone through it with two teams. And final word, Brian.
I hope as many guys find new homes as possible. I know certainly the Toronto and New York fans will want to see those guys succeed, even though they're playing for other clubs. So I think we just got to get through this phase and get through this turbulence, get guys settled, and start looking at the new season. And, come March, when it all starts up again, we're just going to feel terrible again that our teams aren't playing.
All right, on that note, I want to thank Mr. Bryan Ray of America's Rugby News, always entertaining and insightful, Mr. John Fitzpatrick of Rugby Morning's Coffee Break, and Mr. Adrian Balfour of the Seattle Seawolves. And thank you for tuning in again. Please tell your friends about us. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Watch our other programs, including the critically acclaimed The Rugby Odds, College Rugby Wrap-Up. Sign up for our weekly newsletter, and please join our American Red Cross Blood Donor Team.